Let's hit on Stranger Things just briefly. Why was that a good fit for you when the Duffer Brothers came to you? How did you see that fitting in to your plans?
So the Duffers came in with the pitch. It was they're two pretty young guys who were hugely influenced by media and television and films, and they had this idea, which was which is Stranger Things. It was a great pitch. They knew where it was going. They knew where it started. They had never done anything at this scale. They had done a couple of episodes of Wayward Pines before this, and everyone in the room fell in love with it right out of the gate, and fell in love with them right out of the gate. They were hyper nerds, which I think make the best showrunners because the attention to detail is meticulous. The big question was, could they handle something at this scale? And they had done a movie, a small, low-budget film for Warner Brothers called Visitor that had not been released. And we said, maybe we'll take a look at the film and see what they do. And we saw Warner Brothers sent the film over. We screened it in our screening room, and just everyone loved it. And it was like, wow, on no money they created this, the really confined space horror film that was just showed exactly what they had, and we jumped at them. Yeah.
It's interesting. You don't have an ad model,
Yeah.
but it's interesting in season 3 of the show, there's product placement and there's branding happening. So is that an avenue? Why did you want to go that avenue or need to? And is that something you're going to do more of?
No, it was a total creative choice from the pitch of the season to do it. It was 1985, which was Ghostbusters years, and product placement was a character in the show. So the way that it was so prevalent in those movies in 1985, in the summer movies in 1985, that so the Coke, it was the new Coke year.
Oh, that's another joke I didn't get.
Yeah. So I would look at the product play. It was not a financial model. There was no financial windfall from any of those. It was it was a character in the show.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Did you have any revenue from Coke? Or?
I don't think so. I think it was all just.
Did you pay them?
We initially, I don't know how the deal ended, to be honest with you, but I know that initially we had to pay a license fee to use the Coke can.
Yeah. Oh, how interesting.
And what I did love about this, the preciousness of the way that I've got to learn the way that companies treat their history and their brands. I mean, when they on the set when we were shooting in Atlanta, the Nike shoes from 1985 that they brought in, those are authentic 1985 shoes that they brought in like gold bricks. I mean, they were in cases and with security guards, and I mean, it was incredible. And similar with the way that the Coke can would be presented. There was a lot of rigid rules around all the way we handled all those brands.
Oh yeah, it's like Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
And I think about the Lego, the Eggo waffles and all those kind of things that we saw how that caught fire in season 2.
Absolutely.
So.
Interesting. Speaking of Atlanta,
Yeah.
When you were talking about Ed Asner and the power of the medium to have a political import, so there's recently Netflix has made statements that if the abortion legislation passes in Georgia, that you might completely pull out a production there. Can you talk about that decision, and do you worry ever about mixing political and production decisions?
Yeah, well, it's a real practical business decision, which is that if Atlanta if that happened, it would create a place where creative people wouldn't want to go work. So when I say we're not going to invest in Georgia if we do that, I don't want to make an investment in a place where nobody wants to go. And I definitely wouldn't force anyone to go that it was against their political will to go. So it's mostly a practical decision, and it was enough of the feedback from the town who was working there, who were very conflicted about it, and said, "Look, this." And by the way, it wasn't the case when they signed up. So the rules changed on them when they got there, and I had to reassure all of our talent that if I would not force you to do something that was in conflict with your own values. To go to work there. So, and there's a working model for this. We've seen it in North Carolina, which used to be a big production hub, and there's hardly any production there anymore. So it's just really not anyone. It's not me or Netflix imposing this political view on them. There's a practical business choice to be made that it will not be a friendly place for creative talent to go work.
Do you anticipate you would take an economic hit if subscribers leave because of the choice because it would be politicized?
Yeah, I mean, I hope. I mean, I hope not. But in one
I
of
mean,
those.
hopefully the opposite.
Yeah, yeah. I think people would understand that it was, that it's not. It really wasn't meant to be to try to influence politics or influence local politics. It was just being
Yeah.
really clear that there was a real cause and effect that was happening.
I want to talk about a little bit about major acquisitions of previously aired content and how Netflix has kind of changed the game for that as well. So
Yeah.
specifically Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
So season 3 of Breaking Bad, it was kind of, I don't want to say a sleeper hit on AMC, but people were slow to catch on.
Yeah.
You start licensing the first 2 seasons to air on Netflix.
Yeah.
Talk about why you wanted it and then the impact it had on the show.
It's funny now that I think about how important picking those shows from the other networks was to the business early on, both in watching, in the ratings analytics and our own analytics around, what we thought the shows were. We even got to a place where, we were analyzing the success rates of the writers' rooms and those kind of things, trying to figure out at the May screenings level, what shows we should be buying. And sometimes it would, the nice thing about licensing already aired content is you have a show and you have ratings. You at least have some points of the spreadsheet are filled in a little bit. And Breaking Bad, what we saw in Breaking Bad right away was a character which was not very common on basic cable. This great anti-hero character. If you go back now and watch the pilot for Breaking Bad, it's one of the best pilots I've ever seen.
I've seen it many times.
Yeah, and watch it in the context of the last episode, and then watch the pilot together. It's perfect television, and it was a super fascinating world. And so we were just attracted to the quality of the show at the beginning, and we had a good relationship with AMC through Mad Men, and so when we started talking about it early on, we fell in love with the show, and it always felt, because we were came into it in the second season, it always felt like a little bit like ours. We really were champions of the show and champions of Vince.
Well, were you surprised or did you anticipate that you would get the viewers that they couldn't?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, honestly, at that point, I don't think we had I don't think we could point to a show and positively say there's a cause and effect of it being on Netflix and it being more successful on TV than it used to be. Because remember, everyone was afraid of the opposite, which is people would stop watching it on the network and watch it only on Netflix. And what the truth is that you got both. Some people, of course, stopped watching it because they wanted to watch it on Netflix, but the total audience grew because the people who found it on Netflix, because the discovery vehicle was so much better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm curious now about, the relationship you have with other networks and studios. So in that case, it was a win-win. But how do
I think Mad Men was that too for
Mad
AMC
Men for
and us,
sure, yeah. I mean, a lot of shows you found Second Life.
Yeah. I thought that moment of Vince thanking Netflix at the Emmys, as badly as I felt for AMC, was a real moment of pride for us.
He meant it too.
Yeah.
I'm sure I discovered it on Netflix. So how do you walk the line in having to license this content from these other studios and networks while also competing with them now as an original program creator?
Well, it's interesting too. Matt Blank said the word frenemy for the first time to me, which I never heard the word before, and I certainly never heard it talked about me at the time. This is years ago. And he said, I think of Netflix as a frenemy, which is, yes, we are competitors, and your business is important to us too, because you buy our programming. And it's not that unusual a relationship. I mean, Fox makes ABC's most successful show, and they compete with in that world, they compete for advertising dollars, they compete for timeshare, they compete for brain share, they compete for Emmys, they compete for everything, and yet they still find a world where Fox is producing TV for other networks, and ABC Television is producing content for other networks, and so I didn't think it was that unusual a circumstance, and not until this iteration of over-the-top subscription services has there been a kind of a winner-take-all mentality that's coming from the existing networks and studios.
Well, for sure, it seems to be changing. I mean, from frenemy to friends, you're going to lose friends. Going back to Warner. So how you anticipated this early on, as you said, with going to original content, but Who do you see as the main competition for your business model and just for subscribers and viewers and all of it right now?
Well, first of all, I think what's great is that it's just TV is evolving. So in the second quarter of this year, paid television lost 1.5 million subs. It's about 3 times more cancellations than the year before at the same time. So the exit of traditional TV models is accelerating, and that's happening. You know, there's nothing we can none of, and it's going to get accelerated around Disney Plus and around Warner Media and HBO Max. I was trying to think, was it HBO Plus or HBO Max? And Universal Comcast model that's going to be coming out. All these models are going to be giving people alternatives to traditional television. So the bigger question is that now they're faced with the question of, before it was, we knew we were going to sell to Netflix because we sell to syndication. We sell to somebody. We're just selling to Netflix. We have a new buyer. And sellers always want a new buyer. And I think what's happening now is, can they serve the need to the consumer better and monetize it that way better than they could monetize it by selling it to us? And it's all that is TBD. What is true is that even if Disney Plus and HBO Max and all these things are great services, that I don't think that they come at our expense. I think definitely will come at the cost of accelerated cord cutting, and people will have a choice to make of how many services they're gonna have. And so for me, I don't ever think, oh, I got to be better than them. I just have to have shows that people love. And one thing, no matter how good Disney Plus is, Stranger Things isn't there. And no matter how great HBO Max is, Orange is the New Black isn't there. So I do think it's one of those things where, depending on what you love, you're going to decide what you have to have. And there'll be everyone will have a few, some people more than others, and people will choose their services around with the content that they really love, which is not any different than picking, cable bundles and those kind of things.
Well, I was going to say, it's almost like there's probably going to be a new aggregator like cable, and it's going to probably cost users the same amount of money to keep HBO and Amazon and Netflix.
Yeah, I think the big break is, do you value all the programming on all those channels enough to have them? I know, like at home, if you wanted to cancel HBO at home, you probably don't know how on cable, right? And if you did, your bill would actually go up. So it's a real strange dynamic.
That's true, because they bundle it with the internet.
Right.
Right.
So there's so I think what we're having now is that we're into an era of consumer control in a way that people can really will opt in and out of the things that they do and they don't want. And if you really want to we don't have any sports, so
would you ever go into live television?
My philosophy on sports has been, and news has been, when it's the next best use of about $10 billion, because that's what it would cost to meaningfully be in it, then we'd have to think about it. But for now, I think that there's plenty of room in the kind of professional filmed entertainment space, movies and television, to keep growing there without taking $10 billion away from that to try a sports deal.
What about video games?
But probably not. Those are, again, I think that that business, what we do interactive programming, as you saw with Bandersnatch this year.
Was fantastic.
And You vs. Wild that we did with Bear Grylls. And
we'll talk about Black Mirror Bandersnatch just briefly, what it is.
So Black Mirror is I think it's the modern Twilight Zone, but much better. And it is a show that's, every episode is about the kind of eventual evil extremes of technologies in our lives. And when we thought about this idea of trying to do more interactive television, which has always been kicking around since kind of the DVD-ROM days and CD-ROM days of storytelling, this kind of promise of choose your own adventure storytelling. And we tried different iterations of it, and I think we kept playing with the technology until we got it right. And then we did it on a couple of animated series where you could choose your own adventures, really geared to kind of preschool, watching on an iPad. And the technology, we kept getting the technology better to where it worked on a video game console, or worked on a Blu-ray player, or worked on however you watch Netflix, you could do it. And the idea came along from Charlie and Annabelle to say, could we use that technology to tell a different story? And that was kind of the creative challenge of interactive TV all the time, is could you use the interactivity to be part of the story instead of just a gimmick? And so this was kind of a hyper meta. Bandersnatch was kind of a hyper meta interactive movie, which was about the creation of something called Bandersnatch, and so it was kind of a joke upon itself. And people could go. And what you find is that people really loved doing it. They felt very engaged in it. There was levels of development on the technology that people didn't even realize they were experiencing. So if you were watching Bandersnatch on a game console and using the controller, the decision making in the early goings of that episode, the decisions are pretty simple. You know,
Yes, no, left,
you want
right,
this cereal or this cereal? You want this or this? You want to listen to this song? You want to listen to this song? And as the decisions got more and more high stakes, the vibration of the controller would get more intense. And so when people were watching it, they'd get to that decision point, it would shock them, and their whole body would race.
Whoa.
So it was very immersive. The experience was very immersive, and in that way, I think it really did add to the storytelling in a fundamental way.
Yeah.
So right now we're in a process of experimentation with. But I think for it to be truly an innovation in storytelling, it has to work across every genre. So romance, comedy. I mean, it fits perfect for kids. It fits perfect in the kind of sci-fi world. And now, we'll see, like with the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt interactive finale, will that be, will it work with comedy? And we're trying it across other things. Adventure Travel with Bear Grylls was also a really nice fit.
Very cool. And Black Mirror is another property you got from Channel 4
Yeah.
in UK that had wasn't going to get picked up there again, right? So
Yeah.
you kind of breathed new life.
And I
into
think
one.
that's an example where Charlie and Annabelle, I think, are so brilliant as creators, and their ambitions were bigger than Channel 4 could support, I think, at that time, which they did a Christmas special last year on Channel 4 with John Hamm, which I think gave the brand a lot more global reach, and they had big ambitions to work with talent. They had a lot of people who wanted to work with them, and they couldn't afford I think that 4 couldn't afford the budgets to do what they were trying to do.
Now, with every success you have, like Black Mirror, there's shows that you've had to cancel. And I want to talk about how you come to, what are the factors for success and what are the factors for knowing it's time to let a property go?
Yeah.
So, I mean, like with One Day at a Time, it seemed like it was getting great reviews and had some, is it just numbers or what do you look at?
It's not all numbers. So the key is that there are numbers that go into play just like traditional TV, which is relative to what it costs to make, do enough people watch it? So I think about if someone's making a great show for a small audience, and the budgets are right sized, and you could do that. You could do that forever. I worry that when a show becomes expensive to produce relative to how many people watch it, then you're creating an opportunity cost for everyone else. So they're tying up budget to watch things, for things that people aren't watching. Can I do that? So can we do that more effectively? And by having a bar like that, not keeping the thing on the air that no one watches, even if the critics like it, I think it enables us to take another at bat and try to find that show that you love.
Is it purely like a democratic or automated process of like what shows up in your queue, or would you have had a Hail Mary for like a show like One Day at a Time, like have it appear in more people's queue right before it's going to get canceled, like give it one more try? Like, do you ever
worked?
do you put your hand in it at all, or is it just
No.
organic?
It's organic, and the thing about it is that when we have done it in the past, you can help the viewing of that show, and it hurts the overall viewing of the network if people don't like it when they watch it. And it's one of those things where you've got to figure out what the trade. I mean, and I can help the viewing in a very short way. Meaning, a lot of people who don't care about a show may watch 20 minutes of it and never watch it again, but they'll think less of Netflix, and they'll trust the recommendation engine less, and all those kind of things. And
then they hit cancel.
And they hit cancel, which is, remember, we're one-click cancel. Anytime you want, you can literally cancel Netflix with one click. And so people really do make up their mind about Netflix every day. And so it is important that we find the content that you really care about and love. And it's painful to cancel a show that you really, and I loved One Day at a Time. And the experience of working with Norman was a dream come true. And I think they made a great show. It was one of those shows that didn't deliver the audience relative to the cost. For all of the championing of the show, in the third season, it barely got reviewed. In the kind of social media outrage about the show was much louder than the support for the show. So it's a heartbreak anytime we cancel anything, especially because I know some people somewhere love this show, and it's going to be, sad for people, and I'm trying to make people happy if we can.
And
So,
Gloria Calderon said you actually called her personally.
I did,
to tell her.
yeah. Like I said, I think that they didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
It's the economics of television. It's a little bit of the studio economics, and there were so many things at play. But she did a great job on that show, and I'm really proud of them. And I'm proud that show will be around on Netflix for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about data.
Yeah.
Let's talk about algorithms. So we can get technical and geeky with these terms. So it's share as much as you would like, but how do you use data, and what kind of data are you collecting to influence your programming decisions?
So hardly at all. Meaning the data what it really helps us, you can go all the way back to House of Cards, if it helps us size a project pretty well. Meaning, I think what we get to a better insight than most have is in success, how many people will watch these shows for how long. So what's it really, how do you value a show? The conventional wisdom will often steer you very wrong. House of Cards, people mostly viewed as a Washington, D.C. story about politics. And we could tell from watching it that, what if it wasn't that? What if it was a Shakespearean story about greed and love and sex and power? And then how big is that show? And how big is that show when you look at all the different, the sum of the parts? So if you like every David Fincher movie, those movies are so different, there's a very high likelihood you just like David Fincher. And if you know it or not, consciously or unconsciously, you're a fan. So what's the audience for hardcore David Fincher fans? What's the hardcore Robin Wright fan base? What's the political drama show fan? And you put all those pools together and say, well, if the show is well executed, which you cannot predict with any amount of data, how big can that show be? And if it is, can we pay more than everybody else for it? Because we know this and they don't. Because conventional wisdom would say that the show won't travel, and we know for sure that it travels. All those kind of things. So does it help us in the bidding process to size the show better? That's where we use data mostly. That's the most tangible use of data.
And as an indicator of success?
As an indicator of success, I think it is an interesting way we measure viewing is not just in raw numbers of hours. So when people, there are shows that attract subscribers. So even if they don't get watched in enormous numbers, the people who otherwise weren't going to join Netflix join, that viewing of that show is weighted. There are people who watch a lot of Netflix. The things they tend to be kind of interchange programming. So if they don't have that show, they'll watch something else. So that their viewing may be not as weighted as the other viewing because they value any one show less. Heavy viewers do. So there's a bunch of different trade-offs in the business that we can figure out, trying to optimize how do we get the most viewing per subscriber because one of the things that's true is the more engaged you are with Netflix, the longer you stay. The longer you tell your friend, the more friends you tell, all those kind of things. So it's all the positive. There's a lot of positives that come from spending a lot of hours with us.
So is success like someone watching the show the whole season and not turning away or not?
Yeah, the speed in which you will finish the entire season gives me a lot of sense of the urgency of how much you like the show. If you're a second season, do first season completers, jump on watching the second season, all those kind of things.
So age, gender doesn't even matter.
No, we don't even collect it. So
I know. Well, I looked at my profile again to see if you had that info, and you do not.
No.
Or geography.
No,
but you probably could know that from my.
We can know from your ISP that kind of stuff. But what's interesting is that it's probably the least dependable indicator of what you're going to like.
It's time. Seems like the.
Yeah, well, it's like when someone watches Riverdale, you guess that it's going to be the CW audience because but it's just as likely to be a 70-year-old woman in Indiana or a 17-year-old in India. So, and their tastes are really basically based on what else you're watching and completing all those things are a great indicator and often have nothing to do with your personal taste.
What is a taste cluster?
I hate that word.
Isn't it one of your terms?
I don't know if I am the one who said it. We do use that term. It's basically how they
what
present.
does it mean? What is it about?
It's like the people who like kind of the YA adventures, those kind of things. Like they're kind.
Okay, so it's like a
they're
genre?
groups of people who like to kind of things. It's not. It's
not a genre because it's more nuanced.
Yeah, it's right. So it's like super sci-fi is one of them. Like that is not just it's science fiction, but it's also big scale science fiction, which is different than kind of the Sci-Fi Channel kind of science fiction.
So does that become one of these cues in Netflix? If you
One
like
of the lines like
Yeah.
strong female lead and those kind of things, or yeah.
So does that change every user?
It depends. Yes, everyone gets their own set of them. That you're probably in 2,000 different. Instead of taste clusters, this is not just new. It's not wordsmithing, but I like the word. I like story worlds because that's really what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, taste clusters sounds so nerdy.
Sounds like a cereal.
Yeah,
I was
clusters.
gonna buy it.
Taste clusters. But
They're
I think
great.
story worlds is like the kind of things. These are the kind of things you like.
Yeah.
And these are the kind of, and depending on what mood you're in, you might like this one tonight, or this one, or this one. So that's really what we're trying to do, is trying to figure out how to find. You know, we have an enormous amount of programming to watch for sure, but it's not all for you. So basically, that when you come on, we try to make sure we're showing you the 30 or 40 things that you're really gonna love. So when you pick one, you're gonna.
So
you're gonna
what
have a
are
good
the
experience.
who was in all of the meetings that decided on the user interface with like, thumbs up, thumbs down, and all of the nuances of the user interface?
We have a product team. That's the kind of work that gets done mostly up in Los Gatos, and the product team to figure. They're constantly testing. They do A/B. The one big benefit of Netflix over the world, I think, has been our ability and willingness to A/B test things. So if you have an idea, tomorrow you can give me some idea, and if it seems credible, I can get enough of the people up north to try it out. And we have so many people that you could then say, well, look, let's show it to 1 million people and see if the take rate on this is better than that. And where that really plays out is something like, instead of creating one poster for every film, when a new show comes on, they probably create 30 to 40 different versions of the key art.
I've seen it pop up in different ways
Yeah.
with different images.
And it gets populated all over the world.
So they know what people click on more.
And depending on what your tastes are, what you're gonna like. So the cost of entry is you're gonna love this show. Now you're gonna love this show, and you like period drama. So you'll get the image that makes it clear that that The Crown is a period drama. Or you're gonna love this show, and you love romance. You'll get a very romantic image of Philip and Queen Elizabeth. I mean, so all those things basically is optimized for the first and foremost. You're gonna like it. We're not trying to trick you. We're trying to make sure you know you're gonna love it. And then so the click rate, we throw out the click rate if you click and turn it off. So you have to click and complete. And then what happens is over time, a few images will rise to the top and work better than others. And it'll be different all over the world, depending on the behavior. In Germany, they very much like, this is I'm not meant to stereotype or oversimplify, they really like objects as much as as a imagery for a film or a show. So like in the image of Walter White on Breaking Bad is not the #1 image in Germany. The image of the RV outperforms the image of Walter White. So it's that kind of thing. So it's different all over the world and different for every taste and personality. But it boils down from 30 to about 6 at the end.
So I mean, it seems like it's behavior.
By the way, that's data.
Yeah,
That's data.
it is data.
Yeah, not
But it's
making
behavioral
casting
data.
choices or
It's-
not making editorial choices or not making character choices
Right.
From data, but using data to audience match better and better.
Now, in terms of what you share with your showrunners, with the creators, and with the public, so Netflix has been famous for holding back ratings.
Yeah.
But recently, like this year, there's been a ton of drops of
know.
information. Like Ava DuVernay's When They See Us, I think Netflix said it was the most watched Netflix show in the days that it came out.
I think it was for 4 weeks straight. Yeah.
Why are you releasing it now?
So at the beginning, when we were doing other shows, I think there was nothing really to compare Netflix to except for Nielsen, and the Nielsen ratings and it's pretty apples and oranges. So meaning they're measuring viewing in a very specific time window on a very specific device. Even like Nielsen doesn't measure mobile viewing, so it's pretty. It's not. Sometimes it's directionally close. Other times it's completely off. So when we put out a number, the temptation is just to compare it to the Nielsen number to say what's bigger, what's smaller. Yeah. And in fact, it's not even close. I mean, it's not. You can't even compare the two. So I think what I was worried about putting out raw numbers is that there's no context, and that there's just shorthand that people would jump to assumptions of what this being bigger or smaller. Different too for Netflix is we make shows sometimes for small audiences on purpose. That this show is built for an audience of 2 million people, and if it does that, it's usually successful. But I think that we tend to do this kind of Monday morning box score mentality around TV ratings and box office to say, so the 2 million shows a failure and the 10 million shows the success. And we've got plenty of all those shows, and everything in between. So when we have a show that does 25 million, depending on what it costs, it may not be successful.
Yeah.
So what I didn't want. So anyway, there was just no context around the raw number. So we're trying to ease in context what it means to be successful on Netflix. And how do we measure that? And what is a watcher is counted as 70% complete and all that kind of stuff. And trying to ease it in because I would like it to be more transparent. I think the showrunners would like you to know that their shows are working. I think it's I think it's an important thing for people to know. And I think there's one way that people do choose things by popularity. That is a way that people do choose. So I think we could be helpful to audiences by telling them what's popular.
Now, are you going to cherry pick what you release and what you?
We have been, but it's just the end game will be complete transparency. We're just trying to figure out what's the right timing and all that.
Okay, interesting. So,
and I would like, by the way, there to be a standard, maybe that when all these OTT services report ratings, they all report in the same form. Would be great.
Yeah.
The silly thing is this kind of like the New York Times writing an article saying they should have third-party verification of their ratings data they're putting out.
Well, because it's just you saying no one can verify it.
But no one knows it better than we do. So we actually have our service is completely automated. The data is the data. It runs everything. And the reason I put those data drops in the earnings letters, it would be very illegal for me to lie in our earnings letters. It's very highly regulated by the
Very true.
Yeah. So the data and by the way, no third party verifies how many digital subscribers the New York Times has either.
Touche. I want to talk about your executive team a little bit. You mentioned Cindy Holland, your VP of original content, Lisa Nishimura. I mean, talk about how did you put this team together and what's important for you in finding the right people?
So Cindy was my first person I hired at Netflix, and
you knew her forever ago.
This is a funny story. This would be a good rom-com if it was. She was the only other person who was doing what I was doing when I was buying DVDs for Netflix. She was the DVD buyer for a company called Cosmo, that was based in New York, and they were a delivery service that you can call up for anything you want, and they would deliver it to you, including a DVD.
So you were frenemies.
We were frenemies, yes. But we'd find ourselves at these events, the outsiders in the room all the time. And one day I had asked her, I said, would you ever think about coming to work for Netflix? She said, I'm a New Yorker, no interest, thank you. And so we literally lost touch. And then about a couple of years later, Cosmo has gone away, and there's a documentary about the rise and fall of Cosmo.com that gets submitted to me by an independent filmmaker. And I'm sitting in this, I had a little office suite at the Raleigh Studio Lot just up the street from here. Mm-hmm. And I put in the DVD and I'm watching it, and there in the meeting room is Cindy sitting in the film. And I go, I've not talked to Cindy in 2 years. I wonder what she's doing. So I call up her cell phone. Cindy, this is Ted. How you doing? Are you still in New York? She goes, no, my mom passed away and I moved to LA, and I'm working at Mutual. She said she's working at Mutual Films. And I said, in development. So I said, well, where are you at? And where's that? And she gives the address. I go, no, that's where I'm at. Where are you at? And she goes, no, she gives the address. And we were literally sitting 50 yards from each other in buildings next to each other. We could see, and I could look out my window and look into Mutual Films. And it was just so meant to be. We we laughed about it, and she wound up coming over to work for me.
It's
so my first VP hire, and she's been an incredible partner. She's gone from helping run the DVD business to being I think one of the most important executives in television right now. Probably the most important executive in television right now.
And does everyone on your executive team have green light power?
They do. I mean, all of my VPs do, and most of the directors do. And when I say real green light power, I mean they could do the House of Cards deal without me. And I think
That's a lot of money.
yeah, and I think it's important. I think it's a thing that distinguishes us from other places, and our ability to scale and move quickly is that I have not set up a system that anything bottlenecks behind me. And I don't want executives to please me. I want them to please our members. So I think in that way, empowering people to make choices and hold them accountable for sure has really paid off for us. You know, that's that freedom and responsibility thing we always talk about. That applies to, you know, green lighting a show too. So I really do. We did this documentary called "What Happened, Miss Simone." Lisa Nishimura. At any point in this story, by the way, she could have just said, "I'm going to do it," but we had normally the documentaries that we were doing up until that point, we would top out around $1 million, and music documentaries are always historically very expensive because the music clearances are expensive. So this film was about $2.5 million or something like that. And she would come in we do these one-on-one meetings, and she would come in and say, "I want to make this movie. Nina Simone's life is important. It's not just about music." And it's like I go, "That's way too much." And we'd have this meeting over and over and over again about why she should do it. And then one day she said to me, "Ted, I really believe in this movie. I think it's way more than a music doc. And isn't it okay? Don't I have the authority to make it?" I go, "Yes, you do, 100%. She goes, "Okay, I'm gonna." And she went off and did it. So after me explicitly saying no a couple times, and then obviously not being usually supportive of it at the beginning, and then as soon as she said that, I go, "Okay, tell me more." And then she talked to me about Liz Garbus, who was going to direct, who was a phenomenal director, and the angle that the thing was going to take, and that it was about civil rights, and it was about mental health, and it was about power, and it was and it was such an amazing film. I'm embarrassed that I wasn't so excited about it at the beginning, mostly because I know that I like Nina Simone, but it felt like a small niche, and Lisa had the kind of foresight to know that this was much bigger than Nina Simone's library.
And this was the first commissioned doc?
That was her
Netflix?
first commissioned doc, yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, that didn't turn out so bad.
No, it was great. Yeah, and by the way, I look back now and think, why did we even have all those discussions? That's why I hired Lisa. She has amazing taste.
Was it
great
important to her,
rapport.
do you think, to convince you?
It's an unusual thing, I think, particularly in the entertainment business, for people to make unchecked decisions. You know, there's a comfort from someone said no. You know, and I think it's a special executive that can step into that authority and that power and own it. So
There is a lot of super talented people flocking to Netflix in the last couple years. You have made huge deals with content creators Ryan Murphy, President Michelle Obama, David Letterman's come back to television. You got Shonda Rhimes to leave ABC.
yeah.
What is going on? Why are they coming to you, and why do you think you're seen as so talent-friendly right now?
I think being talent friendly is the cost of entry. I think you really have got to the freedom and responsibility that I just talked about with our executives, that has to extend to creative talent as well. And I honestly think that they thrive when they've got the running room to do what you bring them in for. We tend to do this with executive talent, not Netflix, but the world, hiring somebody and then telling them how to do it, and versus hiring somebody and saying, "Do that thing that I was so impressed with, please, for us." And so I think that we do that, and it's not just a plaque we put on the wall. I mean, it's something we really do in practice, which is give the talent. We hire the right. Our decision making is really wrapped up in making the right choice in the talent, not in what they do and how they do it. They're going to do great. That's why we were so attracted. That's why we paid them so much. So I really want them to come in and do the thing that we brought them in for. And we live with the results, right? Sometimes it's off the charts amazing, and sometimes it's a near miss, sometimes it's an out of the park home run. But that is the nature of the creative process. And we learn something about every one of those things, no matter where they landed on that scale. We learn something by it.
Yeah. Is there a cap on the budget you're willing to spend on talent right now?
I mean, I think it's the potential of any one of them is so enormous. I just want to be very cautious that we don't walk away from something that feels penny wise and pound foolish in a way, which is I think there's something, every one of those people you just mentioned is a very unique brand and not interchangeable with any other brand. And again, like I said earlier, no suggested retail price for what they do, and brings a tremendous amount of value to the world and a tremendous amount of value to Netflix. So there is an I would like to have rational conversations with them about the projects that they're doing relative to the audience they're going to attract and the viewing they're going to bring and the value that they bring for it. There's a definite kind of dollar in, dollar out transaction that you have to take, that has to go into the decision around what projects they're going to do. But they, for the most part, they come in with a pretty clear idea of what they want to do, either frustrated because they couldn't do it before, or it's been something that's been burning inside of them. The best ideas, right? That's how they kind of have been burning in you for a long time.
Yeah. Is there also is it a conscious decision to try and bring in more diverse voices into the creator level?
Definitely, and I think with my executive team too. I think as we are programming for the world, so to do that, I think my team has to look like the world. The people that the content they're making has got to look like the world too. So I don't do it because of a diversity initiative. I do it because it's really good business.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked about that. The 4% challenge to bring in a woman director in the 18 months. I think there's a time limit. You don't agree with that strategy, but you've said you agree with the goal. So why don't you think the strategy works?
I think naming it and setting out this kind of arbitrary number that it makes people do workarounds. And I don't want to do it. I want to do it meaningfully. And I want to blow away that number. It may just not make whatever the time frame is we talk about it is I challenge the team to be in a constant state of improvement. So I want them to be better this year than last year, this quarter than last quarter, this week than last week, about making sure that we have a lot of diverse voices making programming for Netflix.
And you have a lot of strong women showrunners right now.
You do.
And wasn't Russian Doll, like everyone on that crew is a female?
Yes. And I think you go back to in our beginning with Orange Is the New Black, which was, to me, Gingy had a leg up because she'd come to us after Weeds, and we had great success with Weeds, sharing it with Showtime, and but we after House of Cards, Cindy and I said, look, we don't have the team, we don't have people. So let's only focus on fully packaged, ready to go stuff. No development. We don't have any development staff yet. And the very next project that came in was Orange Is the New Black, which was just a book and Gingy's pitch.
Amazing.
Yeah, but in that case, it was talk about diverse presentation, but mostly women writers, mostly all female cast, mostly female cast, but also a presentation of people of all shapes and colors and sizes that you just don't see on TV. And it was a very conscious decision then, that was the exciting part. That wasn't the scary part. That was the exciting part.
In terms of something like pay equity, I know you have a story you've told about an executive on your team who you found out wasn't making what the male counterpart was making, and do you want to tell that story about?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not going to name just because I think it's that good, but when I was hiring a role, I was interviewing a lot of different folks who had all very similar levels of experience from across the TV landscape, and I ultimately wound up hiring a woman who was a dynamite executive, and where she was in her previous job was far less than I was hiring for at that role. And the recruiters, you give them a range of what you're looking for, whatever, and they bring you a candidate in those ranges and those kind of things. So she was making a significant amount less than the person that I was replacing, who was a man, and all the other finalists for that role were men who were making significantly more than she was, and when she came in and accepted the job at a premium to what she was making, but at a discount to the other people, I just said, I know that's the market, whatever, it's your market, what you're doing, but we're not going to do that. We're going to bring you, I'm going to pay you what I was paying
Did she
previously.
even realize?
No, no.
So do you think there's a responsibility to make that more transparent in the workplace?
Yeah, so now all of our vice president, everyone at Netflix, vice president and director, has visibility into everyone else's pay. For that reason, I mean, I think it's a big reason. The transparency is the best path, I think, to pay equity is transparency. So we started off doing it only with VPs, thinking that the directors couldn't handle because you basically are trying to do it based on personal market. And you have to realize that there's a lot of external factors that drive people's personal market up and down. So personal market is, what is it, like there's no, the only time that personal market pay for your pay is an exact science is when I make you an offer, you say yes. And now when maybe you're saying yes because your personal compensation has been suppressed for 10 years at this other company. And by the way, some of that is not all just gender inequity. Some of that is just people and the way people. In my own career, I got a job when I was at East Texas Distributing. I took a job and they moved me to Denver, Colorado, and it was a promotion and it was a raise, and they were going to pay my living for 6 months while I sold my house. So I said yes, yes, and yes. So I move out of Phoenix. Phoenix then goes into this real estate tailspin, and the house, I can't sell the house. And I keep slashing the price and slashing the price. The house won't sell. And now my 6 months runs out. So now I'm sitting on my house in Arizona. I'm in an apartment in Colorado. My wife's upset, and life is lousy. And I get an offer from Paramount for a job in Phoenix. More money. I can move back to Phoenix, move right back into my house, and get rid of the rent in Denver. And it's a great turnaround. I call my boss and say, "Hey, I'm taking this job. Here's why." And he goes, "What do you mean? We have plans for you. What are you doing?" And I said, "No, I still have my house. I can't get rid of my house in Phoenix. My lifestyle is completely upside down, and that's why I made the." And he goes, "Well, why didn't you tell us?" I go, "Well, because I made my deal. I'm honoring my deal with it. You made me. You made me a great deal." I said, "Yes, I'm honoring the deal." He goes, "No, Ted, we want you to be here. We have a long term for you." Well, and they bought my house. And my first initial and matched the money. Wow. So my first initial reaction to it was kind of, why didn't you just do that before? Well, why would they? Right? Honestly, the model was, my market was reflective of my market. My market went up. So if you think about it like that, so you have to constantly kind of be in that mode of checking in, asking, we ask, our executives to do this, to say like a keeper test. Like if this person was going to come to, if they came to you and said, "I'm leaving tomorrow for more money," would you fight to keep them? Yeah, well, then try to do it now. Try to be more proactive about it. And he'd say, if they left you because they were going to be the vice president and they want to be a vice president, would you make them a vice president? Yeah, we'll do that now. So that's the idea we try to do. There's another similar pay equity situation where somebody came because they said they had an offer from another company, and that was significantly higher than we were paying. And I was like heartbroken that we were paying this person so much below what they did. But I didn't know that they were making so much less than this other. And their market was determined by the offer. And if this person doesn't check in with the market every once in a while. So one of the things I said when all of this new competition was coming into our space, I encouraged all of my executives. I said, "Look, if you get the call, take the meeting. It's not an act of disloyalty to figure out what you're worth every once in a while."
Right. And you do that with third parties now too, since the Crown thing happened, right? You look into.
We demanded, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So basically, you do have to. You're kind of responsible for it yourself, and it's not a comfortable thing for a lot of people to do.
No.
So, but in general, I think that's the transparency, and is for me one way to get there. We're super transparent about our diversity data. We also, hold our feet to the fire. We'll show you the numbers, hold our feet to the fire, and we're going to be in a constant state of improvement. Remember our measurement, we try, so that we have Netflix studios, and then we have content that we license from third parties for Netflix originals. And a lot of, when they report the diversity data, sometimes they only report the Netflix studios, which is a small subset of what we're doing right now. And when some of the shows early on, like, David Fincher directs every episode, or, there's a bunch of different things where you look at that and say, well, these are tour-driven shows, wreak havoc on those stats sometimes. So, but we have just as many, like I said, with the Russian Doll and other shows, we have just as many all-female shows, you have all-male shows, and we're just definitely looking for and finding and supporting and driving diversity across the board. That's the goal.
I see we're winding down on time, so I'm going to breeze through. I do want to get your opinion on the Roma debate with the Academy Awards and what is a feature film.
Yeah.
What is a feature film? How do you define what it is, and what do you think about the fact that there was some questions on whether it should be eligible?
Yeah. Well, the questions are only of competitors who are also competing for that award.
course.
But I would say, look, the Roma was and is a phenomenal movie made by one of the most accomplished filmmakers in the history of cinema, with Alfonso, who's made that movie with the same cinematographer. Well, in his case, he shot the film too, but shot on the same equipment, edited on the same gear, told in the same exact way he told his last film. That is a movie. A movie is how it is made. It's in its scope and it's in its ambition, and not what it isn't is the form in which it's distributed. So I don't know that most people see most movies in their life at home. So if you're only going to count movies that you saw on a screen, then you're going to narrow the pool of what is a movie anyway. So the next one is it count if anyone ever saw it on a screen, and does it? And again, I just feel like there's one of these things where last night I went as a fan. I went to the screening at the Dome of Apocalypse Now, Final Cut with Francis Ford Coppola. I loved just going as a fan. I had no people go, why are you going? What are you guys doing with that? I go, I have nothing to do with it. I love that movie and I love Francis Ford Coppola, and I'm going to take my son, and we went and saw it. And to me, that was an amazing experience, sitting in a full house at the Dome, watching that movie on that screen. The last time I went to the theater, I went to the Century City 15. There were 8 people in the theater. That was not the same experience at all.
Of course.
So I'm trying to say, look, that there's a generational shift in behavior around how often people go to the movies. I think particularly young people who may find the experience to be completely out of step with their life now, which is I have to be in that seat at 8 o'clock on Sunday night to see that movie. That makes no sense to me. Almost everything else in my life is on my phone. I can get Postmates, I can do everything. I don't have to be anywhere at any time. Why do I have to do that for a movie which doesn't feel to them like the same as being on an airplane, where of course you know why you have to be on that seat when the plane takes off. So to me, that there's a big and people love movies, and what you want to do is try to remove all the friction of people having a relationship with movies. So if you really are a movie lover, celebrate the fact that with everything that people could be doing and everything that people could be watching, 100 million people watch Bird Box on Netflix. A movie. Yeah. That's a movie. That's a movie with a movie star, with a director, with a screenwriter, with editors, with a score. Those are movies. And the fact that people can have, with all the choices they have, can still have a relationship with movies is something to really celebrate.
Similarly, with Ava DuVernay's 13th, it was eligible for both an Oscar and an Emmy.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
No, I don't know if it's fair. I offered, by the way, I don't think that outside of documentary, what I said is whenever we make a film eligible for Oscar and we put it into consideration for Oscar, we won't then run it for Emmy later or vice versa. I'm saying it's either an Oscar film or it's not. I think I offered the branch to say, look, if we could do the same for documentary, and the documentary branch, because of the Oscars, because of the funding of for documentary has been so hard to come by, that a lot of television has funded documentary feature filmmaking for so many years, that the doc branch has decided to open it up for both.
Right.
So, and I said, look, I'll declare and we'll just do one and not the other, but the branch and the filmmakers balked at that.
Really?
But we're not trying, by the way, to break any rules or to bend any rules or to even drive change in the organization. I'm really trying to, and I mean this sincerely, I want, if we make the best movie of the year, and it's not eligible for the Oscars, in the view of the consumer, the Oscars is irrelevant. I think the Emmys saw that very early on. Yeah. If the best show on television is not eligible for an Emmy, then the Emmy doesn't reflect excellence in television anymore.
Yeah, and it's much broader, the definition now.
Right. So I do think that what I tell our film team, don't get involved in politics of this whole thing. what you need to do is make undeniably great movies. And if you do, everything will take care of itself. And I think there's no question that Roma was undeniably great. This was a black and white, very deliberately paced Spanish language movie with no stars. Had 10 Oscar nominations and 3 wins. And that movie right now, this week, is still in the theaters in Japan. I mean, it's been playing all over the place, but yeah.
Talk really briefly about Netflix as a global company and your visions for taking it international.
So the great thing is the difference between our early DVD business was really kind of regulated by the ability to move DVDs around. Helps that it's a domestic-only business. And the post office doesn't work as well outside of the U.S. as it did. So we never really became international on our DVD business. And streaming, the best thing about it was always seen as, like the entertainment business itself, to be very global. So we did our first launches in our first international launch was Canada, which was not untypical, but our next international launch was throughout Latin America, which we were very early into Latin America. So basically learning probably in the hardest environment to operate in, both from a recurring revenue charges to credit cards to varying degrees of internet infrastructure, certainly taste and language barriers and challenges. And over the course of a few years, we got really good and grew the business and continue to grow enormously in Latin America. Our biggest territory outside of the U.S. is Brazil. And we are producing local language content throughout the world now. And now we are Netflix. You could stream Netflix in 190 countries, everywhere except China, North Korea, and Syria. And in many countries now we're producing original local content, film and television.
And dubbed, not subtitled.
And we are both subtitled and dubbed. So if you go on Netflix and you see something dubbed, you can just go into the options and turn it to subtitles. And you can, any combination. So you can do English language subtitles and Italian dubs and all that kind of thing. So
we have just 3 or 4 questions left. Do you have 5 minutes?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
She'll grab me when we're...
Okay. How would you describe Netflix's impact on the entertainment industry?
I think there are people working in film and television today that wouldn't be if not for Netflix, meaning that we had the stakes of primetime television are so high because there's so few slots that that people don't get a chance to break out and break in. So I think because we don't have the narrowness of the odds of trying something are much better. So you can try to get in, you can get a slot on Netflix where you couldn't have got a slot on primetime television and never found your voice or never found your way. So I do think that we have been able to break new voices and tell new stories that would never be on television. I think the television in the form of whatever it is versus dictated by the 30-minute grid and advertising-driven decision-making that goes into the art of television, I think is kind of more and more going by the wayside, and that it's more true to the creator and true to the art form, which I'm super proud of that. And I think the idea that a television show or movie could come from anywhere in the world and be an international hit everywhere in the world is something that's really brand new. I'm really excited about that too.
You've had many mentors in your life. I'm sure you've been given much great advice in your life. What's the best advice you have received, and what advice would you give someone just starting in this industry today?
So I'm going to start with the give while I think about what I received, because I think the great thing is I've picked up. I so admire and love people who in this business, meaning it's not lost on me how many hours of my life and years of my life was spent in front of a TV, and that the work of people who came before me to keep that entertainment, which is entertainment is just I think it's such a trite way to describe what's happening on TV, because I think what's happening is so much more important. What makes you cry, what makes you laugh, what makes you think, what makes you go off and read something and figure something out, it defines who you are. And I think that that interaction with television helps you figure out who you are. And I don't know what's more important than that. So the people who did that for me, and then the fact that I get to know them now, I would have been happy just to see them on the street and get a selfie. But I get to work with Norman Lear. I told you I went to Carl Reiner's house and had lunch with Carl Reiner. And to me, like that, I spent every single night of my life as a kid watching the Dick Van Dyke Show. And I'd sit with Carl Reiner describing to me how he came up with the idea for the Dick Van Dyke Show. I couldn't even describe to him, so I didn't bother, what he meant to me, even though he had no idea who I was. So I think that the advice I would give people is don't underestimate the impact you're having on the world. And I think it's easy to do that. I think it's easy to get caught up in the grind of deadlines and budget discussions and agent discussions and all those kind of things, and lose sight of the idea that someone is learning something about themselves tonight based on the show that you made. That they'll never forget. So that's the one thing I want to keep your eye on the prize.
Yeah.
And in terms of getting advice from people, Jeffrey Katzenberg gave me some advice that it was really meant for my son, but I think it applies to everybody. And it was people always tell you to follow your passion and do the thing that you're most passionate about. And that it turns out to be probably the worst advice you can give somebody. That really what you got to do is figure out what you're good at. Just keep trying things until you figure out what you're really good at. And you will be passionate about the thing that you're really great at. And your passion may not align with your skills. So you're going to make yourself very frustrated just following your passions if you don't spend some energy figuring out what you're good at. And I think I could think about how that applying to someone who wants to be, thinking about myself, who wanted to be a writer. I thought I was really passionate about it. But I don't know that, I think it was much better to figure out that I wasn't good at it at a young age.
What are you good at?
I think I'm good at recognizing something that's right about something. I can read a script, I can see a performance, I can hear a pitch, and I have enough frame of reference from all those what I used to refer to as wasted hours, which purely were not wasted, in both watching TV all night and working in those video stores all day and watching everything on the shelves every day, that I have a frame of reference for, is something new? Is that a new idea? Is that a new take? Is that a better take on it than we've seen before? Is that for anybody? Who's that for? And I think I have that little bit of a art or skill that I carry around. And then I really think I'm most proud of, I think, is spotting talent, both executive talent and creative talent. Mostly executive talent, meaning my job used to be to pick everything on Netflix, and now my job is pick the people who pick the people who pick the people that pick what's on Netflix. And that's kind of that I love about that, is that it scales almost infinitely if you do it well. And that's what I try to do.
In this new model that you've created, so far from the days of standards and practices and Nielsen ratings, is there a show or a program or a movement or something that is your greatest professional achievement?
I hope not yet. I hope not yet. I mean, if I think about watching a lot of people, a lot of companies, and a lot of studios and networks who I really admire chasing after something that we might have got started. I think that's a pretty exciting.
Have you ever Netflixed and chilled?
Ask my wife.
We will leave you with that. Ted, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would sit and talk to you for another 3 hours, but I know you have to go.
Oh, thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. It was such